watch it regardless.
I'm curious because, you are also, you said you kind of just more involved in small cap. So you mentioned cannabis, you mentioned blockchain, you mentioned nutraceuticals, you mentioned technology, telemedicine, things like that. Are there any other ones that you're kind of like partway in right now, like other money flow areas, or do you think gold's like the best spot, or like what else are you seeing right now?
Well, I was very, very keen on the psychedelic space, actually, over the last 2-3 years.
So what's the psychedelic? What's the psychedelic space? Like legal marijuana?
Right. No, so we're talking about psychedelic plant medicines like psilocybin, i.e., magic mushrooms,
Yep.
MDMA, and LSD as a treatment for mental health disorders. And the clinical trials that are being run right now and over the last sort of 4 or 5 years are incredibly compelling. And when you look at the size of an industry like, depression treatment, for example, and the success of traditional treatments is incredibly low, right? And then there's companies like Compass Pathways that now I think a $2 billion company founded out of the UK. They're running clinical trials in the UK, USA, Canada, putting hundreds of patients through psilocybin trials to treat what they determined to be treatment-resistant depression, meaning they've been unsuccessful with traditional SSRIs, right? Depression medicine. Mm-hmm. And there's clinical trials that are stacking up now supporting a counseled and guided psychedelic experience that is proving able to change the way we think about ourselves, our self-beliefs and our preconceived ideas that's having a very positive effect on things like depression, on addiction, end-of-life anxiety. It's an industry that I was watching really, really closely for about 3 years because the science was so compelling. Mm-hmm. Whenever you have it, it's similar to cannabis in that, clinical studies were blocked by prohibition for so long. And so there's just a lot we don't know about these molecules and their potential medicinal benefits. I mean, that was the real thing with cannabis, right? It was the real downside to prohibition is that you couldn't study the compounds, right? You couldn't learn more about the potential impact. And now that we've lifted up that gate, there's all sorts of amazing science coming out about how to not just cannabis, but the various cannabinoids that come out of the plants and how they can be utilized. And we're seeing similar studies now and getting clinical passes on specifically MDMA and psilocybin. And although the science is very compelling, I haven't seen a business model that really convinces me yet that there's something there and necessarily definitely a capital markets play there. But it's an emerging industry. There was a ton of dough going that direction sort of 1.5 years, 2 years ago. But I believe it was really just on the heels of maybe this is cannabis part 2 industry. And I just didn't believe that to be the case. So it's an industry that I'm watching very closely in the private sector. Haven't found a company that I believed in enough to take a position in, but one that I am watching very closely. Then, like I said, the health science sector in general, like I love the health sector, whether nutrition, nutraceuticals, I've got a couple of big positions in some telemedicine businesses, which I think are just fantastic that this industry is, it's one of the silver linings of an unfortunate situation like a global pandemic. We're stuck at home and it's expediting the evolution of some of these companies. Like, I would probably visit my doctor far more often if it was as simple as a Skype call instead of having to call in, book an appointment, wait 3 weeks and get in there.
Yeah, and everybody's been forced now to get used to Zoom or Skype or whatever it is. And so as you become more used to that, then, of course, seeing your doctor seems pretty simple. I have read a lot about, as you're talking about the benefits of the psilocybin MDMA treatments. And it looks like overwhelmingly positive. I mean, the amount of stuff they've been able to do has been amazing. In the United States, it started with like one state. I think it was Colorado legalized marijuana first, and then it just spread. I think Oregon is now like legalizing psilocybin treatment. But I know there's a handful of other therapists that are doing both. Actually, the psilocybin, the LSD, which they call something else, I forget, and then the MDMA. So I think I've been watching it as well, and I think like anything, if you get in early, if as you said earlier, like if you had the hands, like as a contrarian, to get in and wait for 7 years, the rewards can be big. For me, again, as a surfer and not a professional knife catcher, I kind of like to wait for that trend to develop a little bit. And so I think it requires a little bit of legalization, maybe some policy change that I haven't really seen yet. I mean, Oregon, I guess, is a little bit, so maybe it'll happen.
Yeah, there's special circumstances licenses right now for maybe 4 or 5 companies in the US and Canada that have approval to synthesize the psilocybin compound and then utilize them in trials. And the results look great, right? In terms of like sort of one treatment, you're seeing 6 months post-treatment, limited or no effects of what was treatment-resistant depression. And the problem that's probably going to occur there is that, cannabis as either a recreational or medicinal application is generally recurring use, right? And that's why there's money to be made. Because there's money to be made, that industry got pushed forward, right? You look at the psychedelic industry, and the clinical trials so far are so positive that it literally is one treatment, and 6-8 months later, results are still there. And so, unfortunately, although it's, we're talking about potential really impactful cure for mental health, that's amazing. But because the recurring treatment, that's the thing, right? And unfortunately, it takes money to push these things forward. So,
and I mean, they want you to be taking a prescription, antidepressant for the rest of your life, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So there's that, but also that prescription can be patented or whatever, but you can't patent a plant. And so you have that problem as well.
Yeah.
So definitely an uphill battle. It's a shame to see, regulations trampling what could potentially be, life-changing treatments, as you said. I mean, some of the reports I've seen have been amazing.
Well, yeah, the depression treatment business is a, multi-billion-dollar industry, but it's really a subscription business, right? Mm-hmm. And so to replace that is going to be very, very challenging.
Well, the problem is with that industry is that, whatever they're going to put you on, Xanax or Zoloft or whatever it may be, I don't even know the names of all of them, but, it's like if you're depressed, you don't have a Xanax deficiency.
Right.
You don't need Xanax. Like, what is causing the depression? It's either something mentally, some sort of trauma, something whatever, or it could be some kind of chemical, makeup in your body, but it's not because you lack Xanax. You know what I mean? So, using something like these alternative treatments, you can go through the mental side, or you could work on your diet side, taking stuff out of your diet, adding stuff in. But I don't see how the prescription of Xanax for the rest of your life solves that, but that's the money side, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. The telemedicine space is interesting. I haven't seen direct plays on that. The biotech space is something that I have been kind of watching. I think there's a lot of advancement there. Obviously, with the whole COVID thing, therapeutics and whatnot. So I have been watching that. Have you looked at that at all, or?
You know what, Mark? I don't. And it's funny. It's never really attracted a lot of capital in Canada where I live. And although it's a massive industry in the United States, it's out east, Montreal, there's maybe a handful of companies, but it's never been big enough out here for me to know enough entrepreneurs to make a qualified decision about investing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I see the industry, it's exciting, but because it doesn't exist to any large extent out here, and because I guess my approach is all about getting to know the individuals behind the funds and the companies, I haven't had that opportunity. And so it's never really been an industry that I played with.
And that's a great answer. And it goes back to what you said earlier, right? About investing in what you know. And so I get asked all the time, oh, what about this? Or what about that? And I said, I don't have the expertise there. And so I don't go into those areas. I do recognize them and I think there's opportunity there, but because I don't understand it, then I just stay away. And I think most people could benefit from that. We see, people buying all kinds of things they don't understand. And a lot of times it doesn't work out so well. So I think that's a great thing. And then obviously you own a business. So then you're investing in the business as well, which I always tell everybody, like, I believe that the best investment you could ever make is in yourself. Right. And so invest in your own education, invest in your own business. And you mentioned earlier, you're like your newsletter and your YouTube channel, one's like making money and one's protecting your money.
Yes.
And so really there's like 3 levels of money: making it, growing it, and then protecting it.
Yeah.
And you really need to focus on that. And so many people, I talk about investment stuff. Everyone's talking about, I want to invest, I want to grow my money. And that's fine, but you need to also focus on making money. And a lot of people, I feel, unfortunately, neglect that part. And they think they can become a full-time investor, and they don't realize, like, well, the investing is kind of what you do with your money after you make it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Managing a portfolio full-time can be incredibly stressful.
Well, and you need to have a lot of money.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like you don't start with $1,000 and then become a full-time investor. Like you start with like a few, $10 million and then maybe become a full-time investor.
Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, some great insights from you, Jay. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I think, like I said, your unique insight, because you're putting these events together, you're networking with all these builders and owners and investors. It just gives you such unique insight, and I love to get that perspective. Invest in what you know,